We're delighted now to have Travis Kuhn from Argus International, who's going to take us through a review of traffic.
Perfect. Thank you, Al. Thank you, everyone. As you mentioned, my name is Travis Kuhn. I have the opportunity at Argus to oversee our software consulting certification assessment business. Argus, as an organization, is most known for auditing, but actually a bigger portion of our business is our software side. And what we're going to do today, I wanted to walk through our data analysis side that we have that tracks the global flight activity industry for private aviation. So before I get started, I have a rhetorical question to ask everybody, which is, how do you quantify the health of private aviation? And as everybody's running their businesses, the challenge we have, and it's been mentioned here, is that private aviation is just, in fact, that it's private. So how do you quantify it? Is it by the number of aircraft on backlog deliveries for OEMs? Is it the number of active airplanes flying? Is it the sentiments in news? Is it flight hours? I think everybody, if you talk to people, quantify it just a little bit differently. So what I want to do is kind of walk through the health of the industry in terms of flight activity. So what I want to do real quick is just kind of lay a little bit of groundwork in terms of what is the size of our industry. So in 2024, globally speaking, for private aviation movements, we saw about 4.8 million private aviation movements around the globe. There's a lot of information on here, so I'm going to kind of walk through what these charts are telling you. Essentially, what it comes down to, if you break it down by the regions of the world, the United States represents about 64% of those 4.8 million flights. And then from there, what happens? The number 2 country in the world, that's Canada at 4.4%. But here's what's really interesting. If you look at the top 20 countries, which are all listed on this pie chart here on the right, if you go from 64% is the number 1 country to the number 20 country, which is New Zealand, makes up about 0.3%. So there's a huge discrepancy in terms of operations, even in the top countries around the world. Interestingly enough, though, if we combine all of the European countries together, it actually makes up about 17% of the global market. So it moves Europe into the number 2 portion in terms of flight activity. All that to be said, if you combine Europe and North America, 85% of global private aircraft movements are in those 2 regions. Looking around the rest of this, really one of the things I wanted to highlight here is just what does business aviation look like in terms of the global aviation landscape, and you see this on the bottom right here. If you look, we can see the business aviation market globally in 2024, as we mentioned, 4.8 million movements. That was off about 1.4%. And then the airline industry, you're seeing about 33 million movements in 2024, which basically made it about 8.8%. We do not include cargo operations in airlines, so if that number looks so low to you, that's because 121 cargo carrier or something like that, you're not going to see that in that number there. Overall, though, global aviation industry up about 7% in 2024, so not too bad. If we look at went too far. If we look at the European market, so kind of looking at how does activity work specifically in the European market for private aircraft movements. So each year we see a very similar sentiment. We saw this pre-COVID and we see it post-COVID. You'll see activity climbs and peaks every July, and then we see a decline down into the winter months, and then you'll notice if you look at that chart there, you get to January and activity starts to peak back up. How is the overall European market looking? Year over year, 2024 to 2023, it was off about 5%. That was also declining from the prior year, from the peaks that we saw back in 2022 and the initial post-COVID rise. Where we're looking at now in the industry, you kind of see it on this chart, the European market is starting to show basically a stabilization, and we're seeing that in North America too, which we'll talk about a little bit further. But what you'll notice here is the last probably 3 or 4 months of the year, activity started to kind of go this way, so it's stabilizing. So as we look at 2025, and we'll wrap up with this at the end of the day, what our forecast is, we actually see some optimism in the European market, as well as the North American market and just the global aviation market. Last point to note, highest month in Europe over the last 24 months, it's what's highlighted on there, it's July of 2023, about 94,000 movements in the European market. So I'm going to fly through this real fast. There's a lot of information on here. Just kind of a question, a couple things we wanted to highlight were, how does the activity break out in Europe? What are the top markets? What are the top aircraft types? So chart on the left, blue, those are your top 25 airports. That's where the operations that are coming into the European market, where are they coming from? What we can look at, if we look at those top 25 airports, 17 of them are either Middle East or North Africa. Only 5 are out of North America, and 3 are out of Asia when you break out the top 25. On the right side of the chart, what we found most interesting when we dove into this data is that the aircraft types, not unsurprisingly, are very similar to what we see around the rest of the world. There's only so many. But the top aircraft types specifically are almost exactly the same top aircraft types that we see in the North American market. So the movements over here with the PC-12, the Citation Excel, the Embraer Phenom 300, you're going to see the exact same percentage of movements in the North American market as well as the European market. And then of these top 25 aircraft types, what's very interesting here is about this makes up about 70% of all the market in the European market. Everything else, the remaining 30%, is all the remaining aircraft types that exist. Okay, so if we're going to talk flight activity, we're going to talk healthy industry, we have to talk about the biggest market. So if you notice, I'm sure one of the things that stands out, this chart here doesn't look as smooth as the European market, where it kind of goes like this. North America operates very differently. So what I'll do here is kind of break out. You see the 311,000 there, which is highlighting October of 2024. So the US market is different in that our peak month is always October. There's a lot of theories as to why that is. We're not exactly sure. What we have kind of analyzed in the US market is that if you look at the month of October, you have a lot of Q4 planning. A lot of businesses are trying to get work done before the holidays. Then you also have a scenario where in the United States, probably the best weather across the country is occurring in October. You have thunderstorm season wrapping up. We haven't gotten to cold winter weather. And then equally, the last two, which I think are most interesting when you look at the October market specifically, in the States, it's the only month on the calendar where all 6 professional sports leagues are in season. So there's a lot of movements there. And then it's also the only 31-day month on the calendar where there's no major holiday impact. So all that comes together. You hit a peak in October. We decline November, December, January, February. We peak back up in March, and then it oscillates. So what's going on in the North American market specifically? Well, as you can see on here, we're off about 1.8% from 2023, which is off from highs in 2022. So we're also seeing declines on top of declines. But what you'll notice here at the very end of this chart is that in December of 2024, we actually saw an uptick. And in fact, we're finalizing our numbers for January, and we'll talk about this in a second. Those were also up for both North America and Europe. So we're starting to see the aviation market go in a positive direction, for business aviation, which is what we wanted. We've seen 2 years of solid declines. We've been trying to figure out where's that bottom, how is the industry moving. And one of the things that helps us do that is this chart. So this one, I think, is probably the most interesting of anything we have, personally. Because in the North American market specifically, you guys all see 6 bars there. It doesn't mean a whole lot if we don't put some context to that. So you have the Part 91, Part 135 fractional market. A quick glance will show you the only one that gained in 2024 was the fractional market. But what's even more interesting about this is if you back this up over the last 5 years. So how have the dynamics in North America changed? So the Part 91 market pre-COVID pretty consistently was anywhere from 50 to 55% of business aviation movements in North America. If you fast forward to 2024, it's only 45%. And what's even more interesting is if you look at that, the North American market in 2024 flew 300,000 more flights than it flew in 2019. Part 91 flew 30,000 less flights in 2024 than it did in 2019. So it then brings the question, well, where did it all go? Well, if you look at it, Part 135 in 2019, 36% of the market. In 2024, also 36% of the market. Even if you round it out to the next decimal point, both cases it was 36.2%. Did not change. All of the gains overwhelmingly went into the fractional market. It went from being 13% of the marketplace to 18% of a larger marketplace. So We've seen that. We've seen growth, of course, still in the 135 market. It grew about 100,000 flights during that time period, but the fractional industry is up about 50% in the North American market in terms of movements over the last 5 years. Something we continue to watch. We continue to have, from our vantage point, we have some concerns on the Part 91 market, which we will continue to watch. There's no denying it's still the largest portion. You're looking at, 1.5, 1.6 million flights. It's still a very large market, but there's definitely been a shift in terms of owner-flown corporate flying and movement into management, fractional ownership, those types of things, and it shows in the numbers. So as we move forward, we're going to watch it. We're going to pay attention to it. It's something that we know definitely has had an impact, and we're going to be looking at it too, because you're talking about a 91 market that was off about 5% in 2024. You've also got Part 135 market, which has been down, but we're thinking that where the numbers sit right now, we're probably right about at that bottom. So as we move into 2025, we're actually expecting not only will the overall market do better, it'll probably be mostly flat, but slightly better. We will see Part 135 activity start to increase as well. So we're very positive, we're bullish on that as we move forward. One of the last things I wanted to show you guys real quick is another market here, which is Asia. We've had a lot of questions on what's happening over there. It was slower to recover following COVID. How do these numbers compare? What does it all mean? So one of the things that's interesting is it's a market that I think should be watched because it was up about 9% in 2024 compared to 2023, which was great, but it's obviously been a little suppressed of late. But what's even more interesting is when we get a lot of inquiries on the market in Asia, most people come in and say, well, how's China play? Are they still number one? The answer is they're not. China's actually number 3 in the marketplace in Asia. The number 1 country in the Asian market is actually India. And 1 out of every 4 departures in Asia are actually out of India. So certainly if you're watching that market, it's very important to pay attention to what's going on there because they have a heavy influence in terms of business aircraft movements. And in case anybody's wondering, the number 2 market in Asia is the Maldives. So continuing to watch that, continue to focus, pay attention to those 3 areas specifically. The busiest month in the last 24 months in Asia was March of 2024. December of 2024 was only like 2 or 3 points behind it. So you could basically say the most recent month was, but technically speaking, it was March. So activity continues to trickle up there. And that brings us to this, which is what is our forecast? So a little bit of background on this. So Argus has been forecasting business aircraft movements for 12 years now. And we've built a refined algorithm. We don't look too far out. We like to look pretty close. To give you an idea how accurate has it been over the years, obviously we couldn't have predicted something like COVID or financial crisis, things like that. As long as there's no significant event, our algorithm, our models seem to predict pretty well. In 2024, we had forecasted a 0.8% decline in activity in North America. It was down 1.7. So I'll let you determine whether that's accurate or not, depending on what you're looking at. So when we look at 2025, what do we see? So kind of looking at the market, we see basically it's flat, but positive flat in both cases, whether it's North America or Europe. You can see the numbers aren't changing too much. You got a 0.2% gain in North America versus a 0.3% gain in Europe. But if you think about that, go back, Europe was off 5% in 2024. North America was off 1.8%. So we're going in the right direction. That's 85% of the market. Looking at each of them kind of broken down, North America, one of the things that stands out, 3 of your first 5 months decline. Your last 7 months, you've got 5 of your last 7 months are positive. And the only 2 that are negative, one of them is December, which is off 0.1%. So it's basically flat. In the European market, what we see over there, 8 of your 12 months are positive. You're going to have a little bit of a, I would say, enhanced summer cooling in August and September. We'll monitor that and see exactly how that goes. But that's certainly what we see in the marketplace as we move forward. And so kind of, really to kind of put a bow on all this, wrap all this up, as we're looking at the market, we believe that the flight activity in this industry, looking at 2025, is going to be kind of this year where we're going to start to see things moving forward. As we've looked out briefly at 2026, 2027, we're starting to see gains back of about 1-2%. we don't personally see, any scenario where we're probably going to see a 5 or 10% annualized gain in the industry, barring a big change. But we do expect activity to continue to trickle up, which is good. So kind of gone through this bottom over the last few years. We've called it a stabilized cooling, kind of a right sizing of things post-COVID. But generally speaking, industry's bigger. It's about 10% larger now than it was 5 years ago. We expect that to continue as we move forward, continue to grow a few points here and there, and then we'll continue to monitor it. And with that, that's all I have.
I like positive flat as a term. With new aircraft coming in and being delivered, and this year we should see maybe 100 more deliveries than last year, are you basically expecting, maybe not 100, maybe 50, are you seeing it, are you sort of expecting the average flights to fall per aircraft, or do you expect, the fleet seems to grow every year. Is the traffic actually not going to grow as fast as the fleet will this year?
Yeah, it kind of goes slow. So there's a couple ways to look at it too. So one of the things that's not expressed on there is if you looked at flight hours versus flights. So flights, and one of the biggest examples here is the large cabin market, specifically North America. The total flights, I forget the percentage off the top of my head, declined, we'll just say 4% in 2024, whereas flight hours were actually up 0.5%. So it's one of these things where, yes, as planes come on, what we've noticed and we've seen in the industry is a shift towards longer stage lengths. So we may not see flight activity increase as much. It may. It depends on the type of airplanes. We're seeing a lot of phenoms come on versus globals. We're going to see more flight activity than we will see necessarily flight hours. And so it's something we'll monitor. We'll continue to make sure it gets displayed correctly, hopefully, so that it represents the industry factually. But yeah, certainly it kind of depends on that.
And do you think the drop in Part 91 flights is a long-term trend? You think we're seeing that market move to be more like the European market where you have more aircraft on a Part 135?
That's something we've toyed around with. The easy answer is it's hard to answer. It's still an industry that's 1.5 million movements out of 3.1, so it's close to 50% of the market. Do I see it? Do I think it's at its bottom? I don't. I think it's going to get a little bit smaller. Do I know exactly what that bottom is? I don't. I think the question is really going to be, we see the fractional industry is growing significantly. Is that all new entrants, or is it a result of people that are leaving the 91 market and going over? And the answer is it's a little bit of both, and it shows in the numbers. So the fractional companies that are making these moves, they're doing it because they're expecting to grow. Whether that comes from 91 or new entrants, it's tough to say. I think at the end of the day, 91 still goes down a little bit. Where is its bottom? I think it's probably long-term, if you look 5-10 years out, it's probably still 40% of the market in North America, but that's going to be smaller than what it was at 50 to 52%.
And FlexJet has just announced an order for a billion, 182 Embraer aircraft, so that's just going to keep going.
Yeah, exactly, and it's only going to get bigger. So something we'll monitor, something we'll continue to see, but it's very interesting.
Brilliant. Travis, thanks so much. That was great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.